Hey, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Meg Bouvier. You know me as the creator of your library of NIH grantsmanship courses. I have over 35 years of experience at NIH as an applicant, an intramural researcher, a staff writer, and now as a full-time NIH grant mentor. I have helped clients land over $500 million in NIH funding, and I'm here to answer your NIH grant writing questions. So grab a cup of coffee or water or whatever your drink of choice is, and let's get started. So if you are attending live, and we still have people logging in right now, just a reminder that you're in listen only mode. You can begin, this is a Q&A session, so you can begin to type your questions into the Q&A right now. Just go ahead and start adding your questions in there. And if you're watching this as a recording, just a disclaimer that today is September 3rd, 2025. And everything that I say today is true to the best of my knowledge, but things move quickly at NIH, and you should always verify everything with a program officer. What you should be viewing in the library right now, well, hopefully you're done viewing courses, right? Because if you're applying for an October deadline, you should be polishing your draft and, making the final iterations with your team members. And if you're applying for February deadlines, good for you. You should start watching the courses, Master the R series, chapter one, and start doing the prep steps for that, and give yourself a nice long runway to write that R01. So any NIH updates, there is an update that I think the last time I reported that the Senate subcommittee recommended level funding for NIH. Recall that the administration has recommended a 40% cut and a cap of 15% on the F&A rate. The Senate subcommittee had weeks ago voted to keep the NIH budget at about 48 billion and not to, or I think they were 49 billion for the Senate subcommittee, and not to put a cap on the F&A rate. Recently, the House subcommittee also voted to keep the budget at 48 billion, so which is more or less level funding for NIH if you don't correct for inflation. So we're a long way from a funding bill, but there is signs of life in Congress in terms of supporting bipartisan support for NIH and the work that the extramural community does with the money. So that's kind of a little breath of fresh air. We're far from out of the woods when it comes to the FY26 budget, but that was tentatively promising news. So a couple of things to let you know about in the library. So I have recorded an update to Master the R series, and that is live already. So if you're looking for something that's very up to date, oh, somebody's sending a meme with a celebration meme. So there's I don't know if that's for the NIH budget information or the update to Master the R, but there is an updated Master the R series that is now available to library members. So feel free to check that out. There was a little bit of an issue with some of the video quality. It was just a tiny bit blurry, and my IT person is going in and replacing those with a better quality video. So if you see one that's a tiny bit blurry, just bear with us. We're in the process of replacing them, but I wanted to get the content out as quickly as possible for the people who are starting their preparations toward February so that you have the most up-to-date information. And that includes up-to-date information about, things like what to do if you're proposing an animal studies project and, that kind of thing. I also just recorded an update to Master the P series and Master the U series. So we are in the process of processing those videos and getting them loaded. I think that will probably be available to you in your library probably by the middle of September. So if you're looking to apply for a P series, a center grant application, and NOFOs are coming out for the large format projects. I've had a lot of requests for assistance on these lately, which is why I thought it was time to update them. Or if you're applying for a cooperative agreement, those courses are going to be available, updated courses available about mid-month. And the samples are updated, the information in it is all updated. Of course, like I wound up having like another big U series win right after I recorded it, which I wasn't able to include in the course, but good to know that people are landing grants still. And I am tomorrow about to update the NIH grant writing program. So that update should be finished by Monday morning for those of you who are looking for an enhancement to master the R series. If you're like a rank amateur and you've never written an R or K series, the NIH grant writing program is probably a good course for you. It has master the R series embedded in it, but it has a lot more information around it to assist with the for people who really are just brand new to all of this. The other thing I wanted to point out, this won't apply to people who are on the call live, but if you're watching this as a recording and you are not part of our membership series, we are launching a new live Q&A membership that would allow you to attend these sessions live and ask your questions live. It would also allow you to attend First Fridays live. So those sessions are the first Friday of every month at 11:30 Eastern time. And that's like open office hours. You can come and ask me anything. And it's not recorded. It's all confidential. So if that's of interest to you and you'd like that kind of live feedback on a regular basis, it would be twice a month for these sessions, which occur Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern every other week, and once a month on Fridays at 11:30 Eastern. You can sign up for that. So that feature should go live on Monday or sooner. It may go live as soon as Friday, September 5th. So if you're watching this as a recording on YouTube, that's in the past for you. So it should be live. So feel free to check out our website, www.bouviergrant.com, BOUVIER grant.com. Let's see if there were other. Oh, and the other thing is, if you are a member and you're attending live right now and are not signed up for First Fridays and want to attend on Friday, because it's this Friday, there is a sign up link in the chat. So it's free to you. So it's part of your membership. Feel free to sign up for that. It's open office hours, not recorded, no structure, just it's a small, intimate group. I enable you to talk. You can drop in, ask your question, and leave. So feel free to do that. The other thing is we have open registration for the next Master the R Series boot camp, which is also in the chat, and that launches on October 9th is the first session, and it runs for 4 consecutive Thursdays. And the time for that is noon Eastern time. And the sessions are usually about 90 minutes. It's usually a little less than an hour of presentation and then Q&A. So feel free to take a look at that. So I did have one question emailed to me, and it looks like a couple of people have typed their questions in. So I'm going to start with the questions that have been asked live at this session, and then I'll get to the one that was asked by email. How do reviewers check to see if you've published with your co-investigators? Oh, this is so timely because I was working on a biosketch on a K08 literally 10 minutes ago and just made a comment about this. Any recommendations for how and where to show your publication history with co-Is? Yeah. So, and it was the critique I was making on this person's biosketch. So it's really important on many types of applications to show that you have published with your co-investigators. So this person is asking, I'm sure, about an R series application. How do I show that I, as the PI on an R series application, have published with my team members, my key personnel? The biosketch I was just working on was a K08, and the person, in my opinion, had not demonstrated that she had published with her mentors, which you have to show. So my favorite way to do that actually is in the biosketch. There are a couple of ways you can do this. So in the biosketch, you have a place for where under the contributions to science, you can list up to 4 publications for each contribution to science, and you can list up to 5 contributions to science. So typically what I do when I'm formatting this for a client is I will bold the name of the of the person whose biosketch it is, and I will underline the team members' names if they are key personnel on that particular application. And you can also list four representative publications just after the personal statement. And I think that's still true even if you're doing your biosketch using ScienceCV. If anybody knows for sure, let me know. The last couple of biosketches I've gotten didn't have it, and I wondered if there's no way to format that in ScienceCV. But anywhere on the biosketch where you're listing a publication, bold your name and underline the name of your team members on that proposed project. And then you can write somewhere like, the names of team members on the proposed project are underlined in these publication citations. The other thing you can sometimes do, particularly if it's not published, but under review, for example, if you have manuscripts under review with current team members, is to just mention it in the personal statement of the biosketch. So you could say, for example, and it covers both things. It could be covering, yes, I've published with my team members, but it can also be covering, this is under review and we anticipate updating publication information as post-submission material. So somewhere in the paragraphs that make up your personal statement, section A of the biosketch, you could, just as part of the narrative, if it's germane to the thing you're discussing, like you're discussing the work that you've done in your lab in this particular area that's relevant to the proposed project, you could say, and my team members have published or have developed a manuscript which is currently under review that represents the preliminary data discussed in section C2 of the research strategy or something like that. So those are the places where I like to emphasize that information. So hopefully that is helpful. Okay, the Master the R series is different for R03 versus R01, and how much time would you say we designate to watch them? This will be quite helpful. So the Master the R series actually has samples from the R03, the R34, the R21, the R01. There are even samples from simple 12-page UO1s in Master the R series. So if you're writing an R03, it's still worth watching. In terms of how much time it takes to watch them, I could tell you it really depends on how much time you want to spend on it. So the nice thing about our new learning management system is that I'm a hyper-organized person. So I have the course broken down into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is chapter 1, preparation, chapter 2, specific aims, chapter 3, significance, innovation, chapter 4, approach. And then within each chapter is a lesson. There are lessons, so there might be 8 lessons, 10, 12, 15 lessons, and they're all separate videos. So if there's a lesson that doesn't apply to you, just mark it as read and move on. So if you were to watch every single minute of every single lesson in Master the R series, I think it's 2 hours and 45 seconds, something like that. Riley, if that's easy information for you to find on our website or in Thinkific, let me know so that we can give them more accurate information. But I think it's under 3 hours for the whole thing. It's less than an hour per chapter, I believe. But again, like, this should be spread out over a 4 to 6 month period. There's an interactive checklist and tasks for you to do mapped against a timeline. And not every lesson is going to be relevant to you. So for example, if I'm talking about like how to select a NOFO and you already know your NOFO, just mark that complete and move on to the next chapter. Or how to select your institute and you already know, oh, it's going to be NCI, there's no plan B. Just mark that lesson complete. So it'll vary by person. And honestly, some people just like to use the slide decks. So there's an e-workbook which consists of the slide decks, and you can mark them up. So it's kind of nice because you can have the video on one screen and the slide decks on the other screen in the form of the e-workbook, and you can take notes on the slides as you're watching the video. So, but some people just don't like videos and they prefer to work just from the slide decks. And we have clients who do nothing but download the e-workbooks and work from that. So, but anyway, if you did, yes, watch Master the R if you're working on an R03. If you watched every minute of every lesson, I believe it's under 3 hours. What's the current pay line for NCI K08 this fiscal year? I know it's 4% for our level grant, but how does it affect K08? What would be the approximate cutoff score? Oh, isn't that the $1 million question? So the NCI K08 sadly has been the victim of bouncing funding lines in recent years. So in a typical scenario at NCI and elsewhere, if you score in the low 20s or high teens, your K submission is probably going to be funded. But the K08 in particular, at specifically at NCI, has bounced all over the place. And I have had, I had a client a couple of years ago who had, I think it was a 16 on their, and these are not percentiles for those who don't know. Usually don't get a percentile and a K. It was a 16, and he wasn't funded because the funding line on the K08 that year was lower than that. So, which is astounding to me because in all my years, all my decades of interaction with NIH, I've never seen K funding lines lower than really even than a 20. So that was astonishing. But then the following fiscal year, it bounced back up to the low 20s. I have not seen anything written nor heard any program officer who has told anybody I know what the K08 funding line is. I wouldn't even necessarily put money on that 4% R01 funding line. I think that was premature of NCI to say that. I think they issued that just kind of like letting people know, oh my God, if there's a 40% cut in the NIH budget, we're going to have to make some really hard decisions here, folks. And we're having our funding line because the funding line at NCI for the R01 is typically around 7 or 8%, varying a little bit year to year. And as everybody knows, they recently came out and said, oh, but no, 4%. And that was after the administration recommended a 40% cut and before the Senate subcommittee said, nope, we're recommending level funding. We're keeping it at close to 50 billion. So I think that 4% number was premature. I wouldn't be surprised if NCI amended that number if the budget is not substantially cut. And I have not seen anything whatsoever issued by NCI about the K08. I just know that historically and hysterically, it's bounced around in recent years. And I kind of wondered if they were gutting the K08 program to finance the increased funding line in their ESI R01s because they, a couple of years ago in their appropriation report, they came out very strongly saying that they were like firmly committed to raising ESI funding lines on the R01 comparable to other institutes. So trying to get it up to where other institutes are. And I wondered because at the same time that craziness with the K08 funding line happened, I wondered if they had gutted their K08 program to finance that change. But anyway, no, I don't know is the short answer. If anybody else has heard anything from a reliable source, let us know, please, in the chat or the Q&A. Okay, should you only include full original articles in myNCBI? Should you add review articles here, or would this be beefing up your myNCBI for early careers applying for K awards? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I think it's okay to include review articles. I don't know that I would emphasize them in your bio sketch. But my bibliography, people who use that, they put their review articles in that. I just don't know that I would put like a review article as, in support of a contribution to science in your bio sketch. That should be original work, obviously. But I know like in my bibliography, people include review articles. So I would think it's the same thing for myNCBI. If anybody has a different opinion about that, let me know. So, okay, so keep putting your questions in there, and I'm going to shift gears and go to my mail-in question, which sadly came 2 weeks ago, right before we would have been meeting, but we canceled the last session because my office was closed for a couple of weeks to give my team a rest before we geared up for the cycle 3 deadlines. So the person's question was, with the NIH guidance that they're moving more to parent announcements, does this mean, one, there will be fewer or no more RFAs and PAs, and more importantly, that the budget set asides for RFAs and PAs will be going away. There's so much to say on this, which is why I kind of waited until I answered the other people's questions. So I'm gonna, since nobody else has typed a question, I'm gonna give some opinions on this, and make clear which are facts and which are strictly my opinion. So yes, NIH has come out and said that there are going to be fewer NOFOs issued, but not fewer grants funded, and that their hope is that this will save in overhead because, and it is true, issuing a NOFO, having worked on the administrative side of NHGRI for a couple of years, issuing a NOFO, it's very time consuming to write them and have them go through levels of approval. So to be sure, it would save money, time, energy, to funnel more applications into the parent announcements. And instead, they've said, and I have to find the notice, I pulled something up, that they would be posting things online that had to do with, I'm going to have to find where that was, but that has to do with what their funding priorities are. So like, lots more applications going into the parent announcements. And just so that people know the difference between these, a parent announcement, historically, the overwhelming majority of extramural funding at NIH goes out under what are called parent announcements or investigator initiated announcements, which is like the parent R01. It simply means that NIH says, here's a cap on the time, here's a cap on the budget, come to us with an idea, and there's no topic tied to it, which distinguishes it from other federal agencies, which typically don't do as much of that. Historically, most of the extramural funding has gone out under parent announcements. However, when an institute wants to indicate an area of special interest to them, they may issue a PA or an RFA. So PAs and PARs are areas of increased focus, so the subject area is a little more restricted. And RFAs are even more specific and are not funded by a line item in the budget. They're funded by set-aside funds. So the thing about RFAs is they typically don't renew, and when the pot of money is gone, that's it. Like you're done with those. So they often don't accept resubmissions, and the NOFOs often don't renew. So this person is saying, so what's the deal? Are we going to have any more RFAs and PAs and PARs, or is it all going to be parent announcements? It's unclear to me whether there will be any topic-specific NOFOs going forward. It's having read the guidance, there's certainly going to be a lot more going through the parent announcements, but it's unclear to me if that means everything is going to go through the parent announcements. So this has ripple down implications, right? So it means that you're going to have to make certain that you're really making sure you understand what the funding priorities are, which in my opinion, the best way to do that is with a conversation with the program officer. But supposedly there will be information on emphasized topics on institute websites as well. So the other piece of that is that things like RFAs and topic-specific NOFOs often requested a letter of intent, and then the letter of intent was used to set up an ad hoc review panel, which was typically set up within the institute. And as we know, review is being funneled into CSR now, the Center for Scientific Review. So these things kind of go hand in hand, right? Like that if you're not having RFAs and topic-specific NOFOs, other topic-specific NOFOs, you're not going to have ad hoc panels like special emphasis panels. Things are going to go through the standing study sections at CSR. Okay. I'm with them so far. And supposedly these, any NOFOs, any new NOFOs are going to be listed. I'm not in the weekly table of contents that comes out on Fridays, although they're still being listed there as of last Friday. But will be coming out in some sort of interagency listserv, so that, which I don't think is necessarily a bad idea, because it allows applicants to see what's being offered by other agencies. And I always encourage my applicants to look beyond NIH. Like once you write an application, repurpose it and send it elsewhere, other foundations, other agencies, kind of shotgun it until you get money for it. Okay. All well and good. So this could save time and money. It could be a more streamlined way to do things. I have a problem with all of the reviews going through CSR, but I've already spoken about that in a past AGE. Here's where I have a concern, and this is strictly my opinion. Okay, this part of it is strictly my opinion. Because there are so many things now that are going to be going in through the parent announcements, and because there are institutes who are coming out talking about expanded zones of opportunity for funding, which means we're not going to fund you based strictly on the score awarded at the study section meeting, but we may pull your application for funding because the institute is particularly interested in funding that area or in funding you as a researcher, which has always been true, but they're making a big point of saying it. And there are actually web pages devoted to this, like at NIBIB, for example. It seems to me that the emphasis now is going to be on the second level of review more than ever. So the first level of review, study section, score awarded. Second level of review is at council. That's where the money is awarded. And as we know, council members in the past were nominated by institutes. You're nominated to serve, and people from all areas of the business of that institute might serve on council. So when I worked at NHGRI, it wasn't just researchers, but it was also like ethics specialists and genetic counselors, and there's always a community member or two. And there were lawyers who had special expertise in issues about genetics, and policy wonks who were working in the field of genetics. And those would be the council members who would advise the director on the business of the institute. They also vote in a closed session on funding. All of the nominees from calendar year 2025 were dismissed, which means that the current administration is going to put their own people on council. Eric Green at NHGRI, who I know him. We worked together back in the 90s. He's been there forever. He was the director of NHGRI at the time. He was dismissed from that position and not given an explanation. And he has spoken about this concern of the dismissal of the candidates for council. So all of this together, this moving everything to these non-topic specific NOFOs, which means anybody can apply on any topic whatsoever, and then having this emphasis on council's ability to handpick for funding applications that they deem suitable, creates fertile ground for funding science that is questionable. And this is, again, my opinion. This is not, I just am worried that this is what this is about, that it's not so much about saving time and money, but about creating the circumstances where questionable science can be funded with taxpayer dollars. So that's what I have to say about that. And I'm going to stop speaking about that because we have a bunch more questions. So that's just me spouting off at length about this person's question from last week. Follow-up question: what about invited editorials or 1 to 3 page peer-reviewed educational practice pages? Should you include them in myNCBI? What about papers for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th team articles? Should you include these? I don't really know. I kind of feel like invited editorials. I think I've seen invited territorials, 1 to 3 page peer-reviewed educational practice pages. I don't think I've seen, like, you typically see like book chapters. I definitely, again, would not include those on your as highlighted publications on the BioSketch. But if anybody has an opinion about this or has some thought about this, let me know. I'm not sure that NIH I'm not sure that I've ever seen guidance about what you should be including in your database of publications. They have really specific guidelines about what can be included on the biosketch itself, and what is an allowable cited publication, but I can't remember ever seeing guidance on what is in the database where you track your publications. So it's really more a question of what people are seeing practically other applicants do. So if anybody has any thought about that, I think this last round is starting to get into a questionable area. But if anybody has any thoughts about that, let us know. I think I'm still a new investigator as I have not received an R grant except a K award as PI, but the system listed me as an established investigator. Is there any change? There should not be. So there has, to my knowledge, there's no change in the definition of an early stage investigator, which remains a person who is 10 years or less from their terminal degree and has not been a PI on an R01 or equivalent. So it doesn't matter if you're a PI on a K, an R21, an R03, none of those matter. It should still be, I don't know if you're 10 years or less from your terminal degree, but if you are and you haven't been a PI on an R01 or equivalent, then your status is a new investigator, which has a slight funding advantage at most institutes, not as juicy as the ESI, but slight. So you should not be listed as an established investigator based on the information you're giving me. And I would email the program officer about that because that might be a mistake in ERA Commons. So, there might be a typo in your graduation date, for example. I don't know if you're a clinician or a PhD, but for a PhD, it's 10 years from the date your PhD was awarded. If you're a clinician, it's 10 years from the date that you ended your last clinical fellowship, typically. So I would check that. There's been no change in that status to my knowledge. Same person saying, my program officer asked me to write a response to her for my R21, scored 35% for the discussion. I'm not sure why. After the discussion, she suggested me to resubmit. I'm not sure why she asked me to write a response for her. So I think what this person is saying is that they were asked to write a rebuttal letter by the program officer as the application was preparing to go into the second level of review at council. And then after the discussion at council, the person suggested that you resubmit. I think that's what you're saying. And if I've gotten that wrong, please correct me. I apologize. But I think that's what you're saying. And if that's what you're saying, my guess is that the discussion at council was not favorable and they did not vote to fund it. Keep in mind that there's a code in ERA Commons where you can have multiple active applications. I think that's what it is, MAA, I believe it's called. And basically what that means is if you resubmit an application and the resubmission scores worse, and the institute wants to go back and pick up the original submission for funding, they have the option to do that because it de-risks putting in the resubmission for you. Because sometimes when people score well on the original submission, they're reluctant to put in a resubmission because they're afraid it's gonna fare worse, because that happens sometimes. So they're reluctant to put in the resubmission, but this policy de-risks the resubmission for you by allowing the both of the applications to remain active in ERA Commons and to allow the institute to go back and pick up the original application for funding if they choose to. So I think that's why she suggested the resubmission. It's probably that the discussion did not go well at council and that it indicated that they were not going to fund it. But know that, if it scores worse, if the resubmission scores worse, they could potentially go back and fund the original one. Okay, I resubmitted a previously scored R03 in June. You probably resubmitted it in July. That's the resubmission date, unless it's a special NOFO. I'm concerned that it may not get a score within the funding line. If I submit it for a third time as a new proposal with revisions from the reviewers, what advice would you have for me? Also, when do you know it is time to give up on the proposal? These are great questions. Okay, so, because that's kind of the $1 million question is, when do you know to give up? The first thing I would do is give your summary statements to somebody else to read, somebody who's not invested in the project, not a key personnel. maybe a mentor or a trusted colleague, or even somebody in your pre-award support office, and ask them what they think the tenor of the summary statement is. So I probably read at least 50 summary statements a year. As you can imagine, I've read hundreds upon hundreds of them over the years. And it's gotten to the point where I kind of can tell pretty quickly from the summary statement whether the reviewers want to see it again or not. Sometimes summary statements can be brief and damning. And sometimes you get a set of summary statements where they have a million critiques and you're like, oh my God, they don't want to see it again. But to me, if reviewers have spent a lot of time patiently going through all the things that they think should be changed, especially if they're super prescriptive about the change they want to see, not just like we have a problem with your statistical analysis section, but furthermore, here's what we would like you to do instead. We want you to do a mixed method study where you blah, 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 blah. And like they spell it out in gory detail. Usually that means they want to see the project again. Conversely, if they say like we disagree with the premise or the hypothesis, or we don't agree with the significance, we don't know what the point of this is, and like you don't have a clear answer for the comments that they're making, then maybe it's time not necessarily to give up on the project, but maybe to submit it elsewhere, to submit to a foundation or a different agency. But it's very hard to read your own summary statements with any objectivity, right? It's like I have a friend who says that criticizing somebody's grant is like telling them their baby is ugly. So, and I have clients who say, oh my God, I got my summary statement and I was ugly babied. So it's hard, right? It's really hard to read these things. So give your summary statements to a trusted colleague or a pre-award support person or a grant person like me and ask them, like, does this look like I should be resubmitting? Be honest with me. Should I be abandoning this? Sometimes you need a different study section. Sometimes you need a different institute. I don't know where you're located, but if you have access to my library, look at master resubmissions, because all of the first lessons in master resubmissions have to do with sussing out what the reviewers are trying to tell you in the summary statement. You can also have a conversation with your program officer about whether or not it makes sense to abandon the project or resubmit. And if you're going to resubmit, in this case, as a new submission, a third attempt new submission, in what form? Should it be the same NOFO, the same institute, the same study section, or should you consider changes to those? So I would encourage you to watch master resubmissions. My advice to you, if you're going in for a third submission, and once you've made all of those, just in terms of the writing, of course, if it's going in as a new submission, but it's a third attempt, it has to be written with no reference whatsoever to any previous applications. And the reviewers will have no knowledge of previous applications. They won't have access to summary statements or previous applications, unless you're going to the same study section and they happen to remember, because it wasn't that long ago that you sent it. But that doesn't mean that, and you can't write an introduction, so you don't have that extra page, right? Like, so on the R03 resubmission, it's 7 pages because you have the 6-page research strategy and the 1-page intro. Having said that, you could still read, if you're going to the same study section especially, read the summary statements and really try to glean some of the nuggets that the reviewers are trying to give you and weave that into the rewrite of the application, even though you're not making any reference to previous summary statements or previous critiques or previous reviews. You're writing this blind to, like nothing ever happened before. This is brand new, but you're still benefiting from the comments from the summary statement on the previous submission. So for whatever that is worth. I think I answered all the parts of that, but if I didn't, please let me know. Let's see. Oh, okay. The previous person is clarifying that that R21 that scored 35% has not yet gone for the discussion to council. So maybe the reason that she asked you to resubmit is because she's pretty sure it's not going to be funded, and because you can have this multiple active applications, which again de-risks the process for you in terms of putting in the resubmission. So I would do it. I always do what the program officers ask. Um, okay, and that's the last question. Let me just see if there are any other. Yep, I don't have an emailed question. So if nobody else has questions, we have like 3 more minutes. So if anybody has a question, feel free. And otherwise, I'm just going to say again, if you want to sign up for First Friday's virtual office hours, it's this Friday, the first Friday of the month, 11:30 Eastern. There's a sign up link in the chat. If you want to sign up for the live stream Master the R Series boot camp, there's a sign up link in the chat, and that starts on Thursday, October 9th at noon, and it'll run for 4 consecutive Thursdays and is usually about an hour and a half ish, depending on the number of questions that are asked. New Master the R Series is up in the library. Oh, the other thing that we are about to launch is I think we just soft launched it today, was bonus mini tutorials, which basically is the mini tutorials from Ask the Grant Writing Expert, but they're listed out by topic of mini tutorial, so that rather than, because we record these Ask the Grant Writing Expert sessions, but they're in the library, but they're in there by date. So what we did was clip out the mini tutorials and then list the mini tutorials by topic. So it's the same material, but it's searchable in a different way. So that, like, if you have a question about, like, I really wish I knew where that AGE was about how to write a rebuttal letter, or how tips for writing a biosketch, or tips for writing the R35, which seems to be like all the rage right now. Everybody's writing R35s. Then you can, rather than having to go through each Ask the Grant Writing Expert recording to find the mini tutorial, you can just scroll the topics. And it's going to be called Bonus Mini Tutorials is the name of that course. And I believe it goes live today. What are the kinds of help that you provide during the office hours? Could you please say more? Okay, that's a good question. Anything you want. So, like, you are, with the caveat that you have to understand there are other people on the call, right? So, like, if you wanted to screen share a specific Ames page and ask me live, like, what do you think of the narrative overview? Does this make sense to you, or does the scope of the Ames look right to you? I'm happy to answer that, but know that the session's not recorded, but there will be other people on the call. So, there are other eyeballs on it. But basically, you can ask me anything you want. I mean, people ask anything, and it's a conversation. Unlike here, where people type out questions, I enable the speak option, and you can ask me questions about anything. You could talk about, like, which NOFO you should be applying for. Sometimes people will come and say, I'm having problems getting appropriate mentoring. How do I handle that? Your name and organization will not be seen by other people, but anything you say or show in a screen share will be seen by other people. So you can ask me anything that you're willing to have other people hear or see. Just saw that there was a reissue of the Katz. Any specifics to worry about? Yes. So, oh my God, the Katz R01, right, was issued on Friday. So for those of you who are early stage investigators, the other two relevant ones are the DP2 and the DP5 so these are the 3 ESI options outside of just the normal R01, parent R01 ESI funding advantage. You could consider the Katz, the DP2, or the DP5. DP2 and DP5 are 2 of the 4 high risk, high reward mechanisms out of the Office of the Director. So initially, I think it was the DP2 was reissued, but they early expired the Katz or they hadn't reissued the Katz in the DP5. So they finally reissued the Katz, and we went to update our asset giveaway with the information, and they've taken the DP2 and early expired it. So I don't know what is going on over there. It's just kind of like craziness. And I thought that the Katz, let me just see. I thought there was something else about it that I saw. I thought there was 1 deadline instead of 3, but let me look. Nope, they do have 3 deadlines. Okay. For a second, I thought when I first opened the NOFO, I thought there was only let's see, where's the ESI one? Mm-mm-mm. So it's the reissue is clinical trial not allowed as PAR 25-322 for those who are interested. And it looks like all of the deadlines through May of 2028 are listed, but of course, NIH could early expire it. I can't figure out the why they took down the deep. I think it was the DP2 that they took down, and they never reissued the DP5. So, but yeah, I don't think there's anything of note that I have heard or seen about the new Katz. I think it's just the same as always, but of course, with any of these, the Katz DP2 and DP5 funding lines are low. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't apply for them. So, for example, I just had a transformative R01 client who was funded. So, and I may have talked about that in Ask the Grant Writing Expert, but there are four no mechanisms in the high risk, high reward portfolio. And the DP2 and DP5 are for ESIs. And then there's something called a transformative R01, which is not for ESIs, but the funding lines on all of these are really low. And I had a client who kept submitting to the parent R01 and getting triaged over and over and over again. And he came to me for help. And I said, I think you should apply for the transformative R01, even though the funding lines are way lower on that than on the traditional parent R01. Because I think that your project is outside the box. And I think the reason you're getting triaged is that it's too high risk, high reward. I think it's too weird and doesn't fit in the funding portfolio. And I really think you're better off going for this other mechanism. And long story short, he got funded on the TR01. Even though he kept getting triaged on the parent announcement, he got funded on the one with the much worse study funding line. So it's a lesson in pick the right NOFO and don't let funding line be the only thing that dictates the decision. You've got to factor it in, but it can't be the deciding factor. So yeah, I don't know. Katz DP2, DP5 all have tough funding lines, and right now the Katz is the only one of the three that is active. So if you're an ESI looking for something outside of just the traditional R01, the Katz is for people who don't have preliminary data and are looking, they're ESIs and are looking to move in a new direction. I would say my big tip there, which has always been the case, is that most applicants I know who apply for a Katz, they'll put in their application and maybe hold back some data. They usually have a little bit of data in the area in which they're proposing, but they hold it back. And then while they're waiting the eternity that it takes for NIH to review anything, they gather more data so that if they don't get the Katz, they can quickly pivot and put in an application for like an R21 or even an R01 if they have enough data. So that's all I have to say about that. I haven't noticed anything unusual about that announcement other than that. So, okay. So that's it. We're a little over time. And I hope to see some of you on Friday at First Friday's office hours. Sign up in the link. Of course, if you miss any of these signups, you can always contact me at meg@bouviergrant.com. Check out some of the new courses in your library. The updated Master the R series is live. Bonus mini tutorials, I think, went live today or will by the end of the day. NIH grant writing program update will be live by Monday. And I think by the middle of the month, we'll have Master the R series and Master the P series and Master the U series fully updated and online. So lots of new stuff there. Yeah, good to see all of you. Nice to see you, Melissa. And thank you everybody for coming. And I hope to see you in 2 weeks, which is going to be another Q&A session. So I will see you then. And as the French would say, courage, hang in there. We've got some promising news. I've had a whole raft of people contact me about funded applications mostly from the October deadlines of 2025. So that was like a real shot in the arm for those of us who are in the grant writing game. So NIH is in fact issuing money. So best of luck to all of you and have a great day, everybody. Take care. Good luck. Bye-bye.